General Barr, thank you for sitting down and talking with me today about police reform. So I wanted to first talk about the executive order. Many people don't know about the executive order that the president signed back in June. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, it was prompted by, events in Minneapolis, which, were troubling to everybody. And they reminded people how important it is to have trust between the community and the police forces. And while instances of excessive force are rare and have becoming rarer, it's still important that we do everything we can to minimize their incidents. And I think most police leadership feels the same way. We have to do more to make sure these events don't happen. So the president put out the executive order 13929, I think it is, and it's called Safe Policing for Safe Communities. And there are a number of key provisions in it. First, it requires me as Attorney General to develop standards for safe policing, most importantly being a standard for the use of force, and establish policies that will provide for safe policing. Second, it provides for these standards being applied by independent certification agencies, so police departments can be certified that they meet the standards that we set. And third, it conditions federal grant money on meeting those standards and being certified. And fourth, it calls for a national database where police departments can feed information on officers who have been determined to have engaged in excessive force. And there will be due process. It has to be a court finding or an internal administrative tribunal within the police agency itself, where officers who have been found responsible for excessive force, their information can be kept so that other police departments can check on candidates. Those are the key provisions. And what they do collectively, I think, is provide greater assurance to the community that the police forces will have clear, good standards for the use of force, and that police officers will be held accountable.
That's awesome. And I know it's been almost 5 months or 4 months since the announcement of that executive order. And this Friday, did a roundtable with law enforcement. Can you tell us more about what are some recent announcements from that executive order?
Right. So we've been working over the last few months with all the stakeholders, and obviously central to that have been the police forces and the police leadership, the chiefs, as well as the police organizations. And I think we have a lot of buy-in and a lot of support from the stakeholders on our approach. First, we have promulgated the initial set of standards, and we view this as a continuing process where we're going to get feedback. We'll work with the police and the community to determine other areas where guidance is appropriate and add to it as we go by. But the most important thing up front was standards on the use of force. And we have promulgated those standards, and they're supported by the police organizations, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and others. And we've also identified all the certifying agencies that we're going to rely on, and every state has, we've identified at least one certifying agency for every state, so we have multiple. And so right off the bat, we're going to be able to have those certified, the adoption of those standards certified. And those will apply right off the bat probably to around 4,000 police departments around the country. Now, there are a lot of very small police departments, and we're going to work with them and adopt training programs and mechanisms to expedite their certification. But right off the bat, most of the major police departments will be certified. We also, on the database, we took the group that currently manages a database for police officers who have been decertified, and that's the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Training and Standards and Training. And we've given them a grant to take that database and now incorporate information about officers who have been adjudicated to have or otherwise determined to have engaged in excessive force. So that is now underway and being implemented.
Wow, that's huge work. I mean, most people don't know that prior to this executive order, there was only maybe 1,000 police departments certified.
Right.
So now you're saying 4,000. Right. And that's just a starting place for some of those departments.
Right. And we'll work our way down to all the smaller departments as well.
Right. And tell me more about the Coresponder program. I know that when the executive order was put together, law enforcement really wanted to have help with dealing with cases around mental health, around homelessness. Can you any update from partnership with HHS on how they can create this co-responder program to help law enforcement officers when they're approaching certain cases?
What the president requested us to do is for the Attorney General and the Secretary of HHS to work together to try to develop these co-responder programs. And as you know, the police, even though their primary responsibility is to focus on crime, nowadays they're getting called on to deal with drug addiction and with homelessness and, a mental disease. And they're not trained to do that. And they just get called, and people dial 911 and the officer shows up. And a lot of these cases could be better handled by healthcare professionals, mental health professionals, social workers, and others. And this is to provide a response team in our police departments that can go out and deal with these issues directly, combining the police officer if needed, but also, having the expertise of the healthcare or social worker brought to bear on the problem. And this is very important. I mean, you and I have seen examples of a cop being called into a domestic dispute that turns out to be someone who hasn't taken their meds and is acting erratically. Well, the police officer is sort of trained to deal with physical violence in a particular way. And so some of these cases, we think, de-escalate the use of force. And so we've been working with HHS on that and are trying to coordinate our grant money to provide that kind of support to police departments. And they're very willing and to take that help because they're the first to say, hey, we're not the experts in these areas.
No, that's really great. And, it's been great that the president has led on public safety. And we're really appreciative of having your leadership here to lead that effort on public safety. Can you tell us more about the First Step Act? You've been in the justice business for a long time and have seen a lot of things over the last 30 years or so. Can you tell me more about how do you look at public safety and how does the First Step Act and the implementation of that would help with public safety and keeping communities safe?
Right. What makes it a pleasure to handle these matters in this administration is because the president is taking a holistic approach. He's looking at the whole waterfront, tough law enforcement to go after the hardcore criminals, a justice system and a penal system that does try to cut down on recidivism by giving individuals who want a second chance and are working for a second chance to get a second chance and be trained for that and be prepared for success instead of set up for failure. And also programs to match that in the high crime areas in the inner city, whether enterprise zones, school choice, enhancing investment, this platinum plan that he's recently announced. So it's that holistic approach. Now, the First Step Act, from a law enforcement standpoint, a lot of crime is committed by people who've already been through the system, recidivism. And if we can cut down on that recidivism rate, that's just as important as taking a career chronic offender off the street. And the most important thing there is to identify the people and to give them an incentive to prepare themselves for the outside, whether it be through vocational education, drug treatment for addictions, and give them some credit for participating in those programs. and with the promise of taking some time off their sentence, then putting them in a position where they can be returned to the community. And the First Step Act provided the funding and the requirement that our corrections system provide those programs.
Sure.
And it seems to be working. I think we're getting the people better prepared, and I'm looking forward to the data coming out that'll show that we're doing better on recidivism.
That's awesome. And I know that you recently just did a trip with Dr. Carson to a Second Chance farm in Delaware. Tell us more about that.
Well, Second Chance is an example of the enterprise zones, which encourages investment into communities. And that particular investment was for the agriculture, indoor agriculture. And so they are training people how to participate in that industry. And, that gives them a skill and knowledge base that they can go out into this very promising, growing agricultural sector. But what was also interesting about it is it was very, in the same neighborhood, a block down was a charter school.
Wow.
And in the same building, in fact, the same structure where this agricultural plant was, they found space for an after-school program for young kids that was actually being run by an FBI agent and a group of FBI agents in their time off, and it was an activity for young kids, sort of like police athletic league kind of activity.
That's awesome.
So you just see how this stuff feeds on each other, and by this holistic approach, it can help neighborhoods keep themselves safe, keep their kids safe, and at the same time provide some economic opportunity and educational opportunity.
Well, we're certainly appreciative of your continued leadership. I know a lot of people have been worried about public safety. Are there any closing remarks to assure people that with all of these new tools that you're leading on, that communities are going to be more safer in the future?
Yeah, so I guess I'd have 2 points, which is, as you know, sometimes people will debate and say, well, you shouldn't be that tough on the law enforcement side. We really have to address the root causes, and I've always felt that those are not diametrically opposed. That's a false dichotomy. Right. They actually have to complement each other, because you can spend a lot on schools, but if they're run by gangs, kids aren't going to learn, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to provide safety. It's an essential foundation. And that's why law enforcement is so important. And from my experience, I haven't been to an inner city neighborhood where the leaders say, we want fewer police. They want more police, if anything. They want respect from the police, and they want to have that relationship with the police. But they don't want to live. I remember one of the community leaders said, we're the ones that live with bars on our windows, and instead of the prison, the bad guys being behind the bars, we're behind the bars. Mm-hmm. And that always stuck with me. So it's important to free these neighborhoods of crime. But by the same token, we can address these other issues, including, trying to rehabilitate prisoners who really, are not your chronic violent offender and who would not pose a threat to the community, and we're trying to provide them those opportunities. I am optimistic that we after the COVID epidemic, we're going to be able to get back onto the trajectory of reducing violent crime and making our communities safer.
Amen. Yeah. Well, we really appreciate your leadership and the work that we have ahead. And thank you again for taking this time. And we look forward to following up soon.
Well, I appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Yep. Thanks so much, AJ.
Yep.